What causes mental illness? Well, I'll try to be succinct because mental illness is very complicated, but I'm going to try to narrow down mental illness to 5 factors, one of which you probably know already, genetics. Genetics is how we're hardwired, but genetics are kind of like having light switches in your house. If you have 20 light switches in your house, it's one thing to turn them all on, it's another thing to turn them all off, and if you're like me, you love dimmer switches. So light switches are there for the purpose of giving you the proper degree of light based on the brightness need. So if you're late afternoon, you have a few lights on. Late in the evening, you're going to have a lot more lights on. So you modulate how many light switches and how intense the light will be based on the need for light. That's where your genetics come in. We all are hardwired with genetics, but our genetics will need to be turned on or off, and they can be turned on or off inappropriately or appropriately. So genetics are highly influenced by other stuff. So your genetics are hardwired, but genetics won't always predict what kind of health conditions you're going to experience because of the other 4 factors being stuff happening. The second factor being stuff happening. Stuff happening in your life will be life circumstances. Life circumstances can affect your genetics. It's called epigenetics. Life circumstances prior to the age of 8 years old. Prior to the age of 8 years old, life circumstances of a highly stressful nature can predict later on in life your likelihood of having depression or anxiety. So early childhood trauma, and we measure it by a scale called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale, the ACEs. The Adverse Childhood Experiences score, there's 10 items, and if you score affirmatively on more than 4 of them, it's highly likely that you'll have some degree of depression or anxiety later in life unless something is done. So early childhood experiences can be a factor, and even later experiences in life. If you have catastrophic stresses that are incapacitating for you to endure later in life, you lose a job, you get divorced, you lose a child, all sorts of bad things can happen. Those life experiences will flip your genetics off and on, sometimes inappropriately, to the point where you can have tremendous difficulties with mental health issues. So you got genetics, you've got life circumstances affecting the genetics, and then affecting your ability to cope with those life circumstances will be your coping techniques and your coping abilities. So if you've experienced some bad stuff already and you've learned how to cope with it, you will be able to better endure those traumatic life experiences later on. They studied this back during 9/11. 2001 in New York City. They found that the people who had experienced some traumatic life circumstances already were less likely to endure post-traumatic stress symptoms due to 9/11. The people who had not experienced many life circumstances that were traumatic before had more difficulty with post-traumatic stress. So if you do experience prior life circumstances that were traumatic, but you got over it, you learned to cope with those life circumstances, you're less likely to have mental health problems. But if you have difficulty navigating through life circumstances and you lack coping abilities, that can be a factor. So genetics, life circumstances, and coping with life circumstances will be 3 factors with mental health issues. The 4th factor being lifestyle. With lifestyle, you always think, diet and exercise, right? There's more to it than that. Diet is important, exercise is very important, but other aspects of lifestyle will be meaningful, productive activities. Meaningful, productive activities, having a purpose in life will be a significant factor in terms of influencing your mental health, and that includes socializing. So meaningful, purposeful activity, socializing, exercise, diet, those are lifestyle issues that can affect mental health, and they can affect your genetics. And finally, the 5th factor that can influence mental health will be medical illness, and included in medical illness would be sleep apnea, thyroid disturbances, fibromyalgia, diabetes, a lot of different medical conditions. But I also would include in medical illnesses substance use disorders such as alcohol, cannabis use, opiate use, narcotic use. Those kind of substances will induce a medical condition in you that will often trigger the genetics inappropriately and result in you having mental health issues. So the 5 factors that I can very succinctly narrow down in terms of what causes mental illness and what you can do to really target mental health issues will be genetics, life circumstances in the past that you can't change, but you can change how well you cope with them. That's number 3. Number 4, lifestyle issues. And number 5, the medical illnesses that you want to address as soon as possible. So those are the 5 factors that I'd certainly summarize as being most likely to contribute to mental health issues.